Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this Tuesday's edition of Alaska Weather on this 28th day of December, 2021. I'm David Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, hosting today's show. And the first graphic here, hazardous weather. Red areas there, starting St. Lawrence Island. That's a blizzard warning out until 6 a.m. Wednesday, so through tonight, could see another 4 inches of snow and winds gusting to 50 miles an hour, creating whiteout conditions at times. And for the northern Seward Peninsula, northwest interior, Kobuk Valley out toward Kotzebue, Noatak Valley, northwest coast, heavy snow warning out, let's see, for tonight until probably early morning hours tomorrow. And that's for up to a foot of snow to fall in those areas. Heavier along the upslope areas of the DeLong Mountains and the Brooks Range. I don't think Kotzebue or Selawik will get 12 inches of snow, but significant amounts in those areas there. And also gusty winds to 30 miles an hour, reducing visibility to less than half a mile at times. And for the central, mid-Tanana Valley, Koyukuk Valley there, Tanana, Fort Yukon, Fairbanks area, the greater Fairbanks area, heavy snow warning out also, and that's out tonight into tomorrow and tomorrow afternoon for, again, up to a foot of snow in most of the areas there. And also mixed in the entire warning area there, freezing rain could also be mixed in with the heavy snow. But look for a lot less winds there in the central and mid-Tanana Valley, and what you'll see out to the west and northwest coastal areas. And the wind weather advisory for the western Arctic coast for snow and blowing snow. Visibility is less than a quarter mile for tonight into at least midday tomorrow, or probably through the entire afternoon. Winter weather advisories also for Galena and the Yukon Delta, lower Yukon River Valley area for areas of freezing rain tonight into tomorrow. And that same forecast out for the Susitna Valley, Western Kenai Peninsula, areas of the Western Kenai Peninsula for freezing rain tonight into tomorrow, Copper River Basin as well. And then we've got a snow advisory out for the Juneau area into the central inside waters of the Panhandle, Wrangell, Petersburg, those areas, Cake, I believe, and that's 3 to 5 inches of snow expected to fall beginning late tonight and tomorrow. So moving on to satellite imagery. You can see another push of moisture moving from southwest to northeast, and low pressure, pretty strong low pressure area. Not really as vividly denoted here as some of them are, but definitely on the surface winds. St. Savunga seeing winds gusting to about 62 miles an hour mid-afternoon today, with snow changing to rain, actually carrying rain with the 62 mile an hour wind gust, temperatures in the mid-30s there. So kind of a warm up there with that low center passing over the island there, and winds anywhere from 30 to 55 miles an hour across the western Seward Peninsula on up towards, let's see, Kotzebue, 40 to 55 mile an hour winds in that area up there in the northwest coast. Whiteout conditions occurring, less than a quarter mile visibility at Kotzebue with those 55 mile an hour wind gusts there, and snow and blowing snow into the northwest interior, pushing up toward the western Arctic coast. And then the more southern area of the moisture there coming across southern Alaska, south central Alaska, seeing freezing rain, Madanuska-Susitna Valley, Anchorage area, into the Kenai Peninsula. Again, that's where the temperatures are at freezing or below, seeing the freezing rain. Of course, areas above freezing, just plain rain, and not too much in the way of snow. Snowfall levels about 4,000 feet over the Kenai Peninsula this afternoon, so even Glen Alps into the mid-40s at mid-afternoon. That's about the 3,000 foot level, I believe, give or take there. but very warm air mass in over southern Alaska back down toward Kodiak Island. Well, Kodiak this afternoon, just 45 degrees, well shy of the 60-degree high they had yesterday. Otherwise, a breakout over the Bering Sea there, and you can see another mass of clouds coming up from the south and southwest just now, spreading across the Aleutians. And southeast coast, seeing a few more clouds than they have been. No precipitation yet showing up there, still off to the west. And quite cold temperatures north of the Brooks Range, anywhere from 30 to 40 below zero. New exit this afternoon, mid-afternoon, 41 degrees below zero, with much lighter winds on the eastern Arctic coast, temperatures 35 to 40 below there. And for the on today's chart, you can see the tide gradient there. St. Lawrence Island at low pulling northward, pressure rises, 62-mile-an-hour wind gusts, I mentioned Savunga, and the snow occurring Seward Peninsula right up into the northwest interior there. Actually, Nome carrying some rain this afternoon, and also southwest interior areas. Let's see, 3 to 5 inches of snow fell at Caltech though, but over at Antioch, just to the south, half an inch of rainfall fell there, and it's generally rain all the way down into Bristol Bay, behind the warm front there, and then a mixture of freezing rain and rain, or maybe some rain and snow, depending on your elevation over southern Alaska, with Fairbanks picking up some light snow and freezing rain, about a tenth or 1 to 2/10 of an inch water equivalent there, and then those amounts taper off, about 1/10 of an inch falling at Delta Junction, mostly in the form of snow there, pushing up into the Yukon Flats, but dry over the Panhandle with some clouds, and then a break there, as we saw over the Bering Sea, with some clearing around the Pribilofs. Also Kodiak thinning out in the clouds there, pretty much dry. Any showers restricted to the Aleutian Range and the Shelikof Strait area. For tonight, next front pushing rain up into the central western Aleutians and pushing in toward the Alaska Peninsula late tonight. High pressure, light winds, Bristol Bay, keeping it winds light over the southeast Bering Sea. Low pressure tracks up to near Kivalina along the northwest coast, starts to slowly weaken, so winds will be coming down. Still quite windy with snow and blowing snow. And again, looking for heavy snow over the central and northwest part of the state, gradually spreading eastward. Again, up to 12 inches in many areas through the mid-Tanana Valley, back up to the western Brooks Range area, but stays dry for the Arctic coast. Chance of snow on the north slope, and increasing clouds and increasing chance of snow along the northern Panhandle tonight as the high pressure area pulls off into British Columbia. See, for tomorrow, that becomes areas of snow, possibly mixing with rain on the south coast of the Panhandle. Areas of lighter snow now, much lighter winds over the interior. And then just on the southwest, or the south and west part of the map there, next big storm pulls up into the southern Bering Sea. And for lows tonight, anywhere from 5 below to 35 below, or near 40 below on the north slope. Arctic coastal areas much milder, teens to lower 20s central interior, and lower 30s, say from Homer, mid-30s Kodiak Island, followed by highs tomorrow into the 30s now for the Panhandle in many areas. Some areas above freezing, like Sitka, 37, lower 40s Kodiak, Alaska Peninsula, and Alaska, upper 40s for your highs, 25 to 30 central interior, and below zero for the Arctic coast and north slope again, 0 to 15 for the lows in the central interior, teens and mid-20s for south central Alaska, and followed by highs for Thursday afternoon, below zero, northern half of the state.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather, big area of IFR from the Brooks Range down into the central interior, extending down across Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta and out to St. Lawrence Island. Marginal VFR down the southwest coast into Bristol Bay and the Pribilofs, and an area of VFR, pretty widespread out over the western Aleutians, but IFR from Adak eastward to western Alaska Peninsula, then VFR up across Kodiak Island, Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, Manuscussit Valley, Talkeetnas, IFR, central eastern Copper River Basin, and eastern Alaska Range, north Gulf Coast, north coast of the Panhandle, off to the south and southeast, though, VFR. And for the afternoon, IFR from the northeast interior, southwest to Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, into the Kuskokwim Valley, down into Togiak Bay, Cape Newenham, and eastward there to southern Kuskokwim Valley, actually our southern western Alaska range to Iliamna Lake. IFR Pribilofs down to the central eastern Aleutians, much of the Alaska Peninsula. Still VFR Kodiak Island, Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, and most of the Susitna Valley, Madanuska Valley as well, and Copper River Basin, North Gulf Coast, Northern Panhandle VFR, Southern Panhandle, marginal VFR, some IFR, over towards Stewart and Hyder. Arctic Coast, VFR. And for the morning Thursday, still the central eastern Arctic Coast VFR, but the North Slope has some IFR showing up, central and eastern areas, northeast interior, IFR right down into the Tanana Valley, and some marginal VFR spilling south of the Alaska Range there into the northwest Copper River Basin. VFR southern Alaska, but IFR, a band of IFR coming onto the southwest coast up to St. Lawrence Island and across Bristol Bay, the Aleutian Range to Kodiak Island. Widespread IFR central Bering Sea extending all the way down to the Aleutians. Good VFR though for the southeast coast, North Gulf Coast, and the west coast as well, south of the Western Brooks Range. And for the afternoon, IFR, St. Lawrence Island, Nunivak Island, in across the Kuskokwim Bay area, Delta, into southern Cook Inlet, IFR now Kodiak Island, southern Kenai Peninsula, southern Prince William Sound as well, with marginal VFR to northern Prince William Sound to near Potato Point, possibly Valdez. And marginal VFR up to about Turnagain Arm, north of there though, VFR, all the way up to the northwest coast, some IFR central eastern Arctic coast, VFR for the Panhandle with marginal VFR right along the coastline. Passes Anatuvik, IFR. Adigan, a little better off to the east there with marginal VFR, either approach Lake Clark and Merrill, occasional marginal VFR tomorrow throughout the day, and same forecast for rainy, mostly marginal. Windy, IFR, north entrance into the pass, marginal VFR out the south side. Same thing for Isabel, IFR with marginal VFR a little better, south entrance. And for Mentasta, lowest conditions, northern approach, otherwise marginal VFR. Tanita, VFR, Portage, VFR, and Chilcoot and White, another VFR day coming up. Freezing levels 2,000 feet up just south of the Yukon River there, the mid-Yukon River Valley, across the Kuskokwim Valley, 4,000 feet along the Aleutian Range, south coast of the Kenai Peninsula to Cape St. Elias, and otherwise 6,000 to 8,000 feet near just south of Kodiak Island. Icing, areas of isolated moderate all along the interior there, Yukon, Kuskokwim River Valley areas, and another band there from the western central Aleutians across the Pribilof, southern Bering Sea into Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, and some icing threats there for the southeast coast on up into the eastern Copper River Basin. Jet stream, southwest flow 75 knots, western Aleutians increases to about 140 knots there around Atka Island, and then up to 150 knots turning westerly across southern Alaska, 150 to 155 knots with a northwest direction for the northern Panhandle. 9,000 feet, upper level low, keeping it cold over the north slope from the Brooks Range to the Arctic coast. Warmer to the south. In between that, we've got 80 knot westerlies there through the central interior, and northwest or west northwest 65 to 70 over the Panhandle, west 70 there across the Alaska Peninsula, 3,000 feet. West winds 50 to 55 knots, central western interior out to Norton Sound. Colder to the north of that wind max, warmer to the south, and turbulence. Considerable moderate chop, central interior below 4,000 to 6,000 feet. Also the Panhandle, North Gulf Coast, Alaska Peninsula to Atka Island.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and today I'm privileged to introduce Dr. Uccellini, the Director of the United States National Weather Service. Welcome back to Alaska, sir.
Thank you, Dave. Glad to be here.
Thanks. Prior to being the leader of the National Weather Service, your work included an extensive look at snowstorms across the northeastern United States. These are the types of storms that can bring some of the country's largest cities to its knees. Tell me a little bit about your fascination with snow.
Well, as far back as I can remember, I've always been interested in weather, growing up as a kid on Long Island, New York, and was particularly fascinated by snowstorms, why they occurred. The distribution of snow was very varied across the entire region. The rain-snow line, all those things fascinated me right from the get-go. And I was interested in knowing how they worked, how the forecast worked, or more often than not, didn't work one way or the other. And that drove me, that interest continued to build and drove me through high school right into college, wanting to be a meteorologist.
Okay, that's a fascinating story, and I think every meteorologist has a weather story like that in some way.
Right.
Due to Alaska's size and proximity to the North Pole, sometimes it's difficult to detect and analyze the weather patterns over Alaska. What's the National Weather Service doing to improve that weather detection?
Well, observations in this type of environment is a big challenge, whether it's from space or from what we call in situ observations from the ground or within the systems. Clearly, satellites have been playing an increasing role in providing the big picture, not only from a visual sense and what you see is occurring, but also from providing the data for numerical models that then are used to actually predict the weather. Alaska is actually pretty well positioned with respect to polar orbiting satellites, since you get a faster return of those satellites over your particular area. And in fact, the polar satellite system is the backbone for the observations that we use in our models, especially our global models, and they're particularly important for observing weather features that affect Alaska.
Alaskans live and die by the weather every day, and one of the strategic goals of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the National Weather Service is to develop a more weather-ready nation. What does it mean for Alaskans to be weather-ready?
Well, the strategic outcome is based on people being ready, responsive, and therefore resilient to the increasing threats to extreme weather events. Those threats are related to not only the nature of the events, but the fact that we're becoming more vulnerable to them as we have more people, more infrastructure that could be affected by these events. So we have to ensure that the observations we make for situational awareness, the forecasts we make for people to take the proper responses, are connected to people's actions, the response to these events, so that they will be more resilient to what's facing them. There are examples with respect to hurricanes. More people living along the coastline takes longer to evacuate. We have to make better forecasts with longer lead times, but we also have to communicate the threat so people will actually take action to avoid those storms. Up here you have, as in other parts of the United States, an increasing threat related to fire. As there are more people living in fire-prone areas, we have to ensure that our forecasts are good, that we don't have false alarms that make people not react to the forecast when in fact they should. But we also have to be able to communicate the threat and make sure that we're working with the partners in the emergency management community so that communities and right down to individuals will actually take the proper responses in the face of these events. So that's the strategic goal. There are a lot of challenges for us in terms of improving forecasts, but also improving our communication skills and linking with the emergency management communities that are actually out there trying to protect lives and mitigate property loss.
So a huge partnership effort going forward.
That's one of the important keys for the success of meeting the strategic goal.
Okay. Well, one of the things you're talking about was understanding the weather information we're getting back from the computers, weather modeling, and you did a lot of work with that in some of your prior positions with the Environmental Prediction Center there, the National Center for Environmental Prediction. What can you tell us about recent improvements in that weather modeling? And you were using the polar orbiters as kind of a source of information that started that process.
Well, first of all, we have to recognize that everything you see, you read and hear about weather, climate, or ocean forecasts are all driven by numerical models. Now, it really has been the revolution in our forecast process in the last part of the 20th century. The success of that numerical enterprise is based on three factors: big computers, global data, not just local data, but you have to have a global data set, and then the models themselves, the science that's behind the models and in running the models in an operational mode. So we're working to improve all three of those components. We upgraded our computers last year. We're going through another upgrade even as I speak. We'll be upgrading from 200 trillion calculations per second to 700 trillion calculations per second by January of 2015. This increase in the computer will allow us to run what we call Earth system models. It's not just the atmosphere, it's the atmosphere, ocean, ice, which is obviously very important up here, and land models that are all coupled together at higher resolution. So you need the big computers, you need the science that allows us to run these models and run them in a parallel mode, and that they're coupled so that the ocean effects could affect the atmosphere and vice versa, as an example. And then the global observations are absolutely critical, and over the last 20, 30 years they've become more dependent upon the satellite systems, and especially the polar orbiting satellites, which help drive the observations needed for those models, whether they be atmospheric observations, land, ice observations. We're deriving more and more of that from satellites now that feed into these models and produce forecasts with extended lead times. Now out, for extreme events especially, we're seeing much improved forecast out in the 4, 5, 6, 7, and even 8-day range, which gets us back to weather-ready nation, because if you're going to get ready for a storm event, you want those consistent forecasts approaching that event from day 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, so you can take the actions several days in advance that can help mitigate the property loss and protect your livelihood.
Okay, all part of the mission of protecting life and property. Dr. Uccellini, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and speaking to Alaskans and sharing how the National Weather Service is working for Alaska and the nation. Wish you safe travels around the 49th. Enjoy your time here, sir. And for Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Winds along the southern southeast coast tomorrow. For the south coast, gale warnings northwest, sustained 35 knots, seas around 15 feet. Small craft advisories on the north coast, where they'll be from the west-northwest at 30 knots. And Lynn Canal, north winds 25 knots, north 20 for Stevens Passage, and then southeast to 20 knots for Clarence Strait with seas at about 4 feet. And moving on to the outlook for Thursday, Thursday's forecast. Small craft advisories all along the outer coastline there on the south coast. From the south, 25 to 30 knots, southeast 30 knots on the north coast, the seas just under 10 feet. And for Clarence Strait, southeast 15 knots, southeast 20 knots for Stevens Passage, with seas running 3 to 4 feet, central southern inner channels. Still north winds 25 knots, small craft advisories for Lynn Canal. Gale warnings out for Prince William Sound tomorrow. West winds sustained 35 knots with seas 9 feet. And gale warnings also for the eastern North Gulf Coast, across Middleton Island, northwest at 40. 30-knot winds from the west for the western North Gulf Coast and the Barren Islands. 30-knot winds there with 11-foot seas. Small craft advisories, Kamishak Bay, west winds 25 knots. Cook Inlet, west-southwest winds at 20 knots. And for Thursday, for Cook Inlet, swing the winds around to the north. There for northern Cook Inlet at 15 knots. Small craft advisory south of the Forelands, northeast 25 knots. Same forecast for Kamishak Bay. Small craft advisories also for the Barren Islands, south 30 knots, 10-foot seas. And western North Gulf Coast, east of 25, but gale warnings there around Middleton Island. Southeast winds 35 knots, seas 10 feet. Small craft advisories, Prince William Sound, north winds sustained at 25 knots. But seas will be lower than Wednesday at around 5 feet. Kodiak Island, west-southwest winds 25 knots, seas 7 to 9 feet. And for the Alaska Peninsula Pacific side, south 30 knots. Bering Sea side, east at 30 knots. Pretty light for Bristol Bay, east at 10 with 5-foot seas. And for the day Thursday, Kodiak Island, south to southwest winds 30 knots. Gale warnings for the Alaska Peninsula, south to southwest at 40 knots. And 25-knot winds for Bristol Bay from the south with seas just under 10 feet. On Alaska Island, actually both, Fox Islands, south to southeast winds 30 knots tomorrow. Adak and Atka, east-southeast 25 to 30 knots. Northeast at 30 knots from Chitka Island, and from Kiska to Shemya, winds will be north at 30 knots. And for Thursday, storm warnings, pretty widespread from Shimei, that big storm coming up into the southern Bering, west 50 knots from Shimei to Adak and Atka, all the way over to Nikolsky, Unmak Island, turning southwest 45 to 50 knots with just under storm force winds of 45 knots from the southwest for Unalaska Island. And for the southwest coast, strongest winds along the Yukon Delta coast, south of 25, east 30 knots for the Pribilof, southwest 25 knots there for St. Matthew Island, northeast 25 knots for St. Lawrence Island. Gale warning, St. Lawrence Island, Yukon Delta coast, northeast winds 35 knots on Thursday, southeast 30 knots for the Kuskokwim Delta coast. Gale warnings for the Pribilof, south 35 knots, and gales also for the northern Bering Sea, where winds will be northeast of 45 knots with 20-foot seas. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, west-northwest 10 to 15 knots, central coast north at 15. Brisk wind advisories for the western Arctic coast all the way down to Wales for north to northwest winds 25 to 30 knots. And for Thursday, from Wales to Cape Thompson, north winds 25 knots, Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort, northeast 15 knots. And then pretty light northeast breeze there for the western central coast at 10 knots, and light westerly winds at 10 knots for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And for tonight, that strong low pressure area bringing the strong winds will pull northeastward to near Kivalina. Winds will become markedly lighter for St. Lawrence Island after those 60, 65 mile an hour wind gusts you're currently experiencing. Snow and blowing snow will continue but gradually diminish there for the Seward Peninsula and Bering Strait, with heavy snow warnings though over the northwest part of the state, Kobuk Valley, Seward Peninsula up to the northwest coast, western Brooks Range, up to a foot of snow possibly falling. Same thing in the central interior, Tanana Valley, mid-valley there could see 12 inches of snow, some freezing rain mixed in tonight, some of that blowing and drifting. Lighter amounts as you head over toward the border or south to dry conditions over Bristol Bay. For tomorrow, another warm front comes across the Alaska Peninsula into Bristol Bay, more snow in the Panhandle, and snow and blowing snow, big storm pushes into the southern Bering Sea.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.